Have we had enough to eat or? All right, at 6 o'clock, I call this meeting to order. Let's stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, everyone. Thank you. All right. First item on the list is to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. All right, agenda's been approved.
All right, so once a year, we have Hoosier come in and kind of go through a past year review, and thanks for coming down and thanks for the meal. So anyway, we'll introduce them, and this is kind of our time to, really get some face time with leadership down there. So we encourage questions, and hopefully we can have a good discussion. So anyways, Donna Walker. Donna's the CEO of Hoosier Energy. And with her is Rob Horton, which Rob is the COO. So again, thank you all for coming. I'll just go right into the presentation.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having us. We always appreciate this time and look forward to it. Before we dive into the content, Jason was joking with me several years ago. We used to show up with a check and we would distribute your patronage. And Jason asked if I was bringing the big check this time. I said, I'm too short for But we do that all electronically now. But it is an important part of our business model, so I don't want to lose sight of that. And I think in mid-November, we actually transferred to you just over $673,000, I think, Brett, if I have that amount right. And that represented a return of the margins that you paid into Hoosier in 1998, as well as a special return of a portion of your 2018 margins. And we are very appreciative of the time that you have that money invested in the GNT that you own. And we try to be good stewards of it. And so I don't want to lose sight of that. What all happens behind the scenes now. So thank you very much. As Brett mentioned, Rob is here with me, and Rob's here for all the tough questions. So make sure that you have plenty of those. He appreciates it. And Brett, if you would be kind enough to advance, thank you so much. So we put together some information this evening to kind of get you up to speed based on where we left things last year when we were together. I wanted to share with you some things that we've worked on in the past year and accomplished. But the most important thing, to Brett's point, is to make sure that we have any discussion that you'd like to have and talk about whatever's on your mind and answer your questions. And if we don't have answers tonight, we'll follow up and we'll get those and get back to you. So we'll have plenty of time for that. So last year when we were together, I was sharing with you some of the global circumstances that were actually having an impact on our business here locally. And unfortunately, when we look at that list, it's gotten longer and not shorter. We know that the war in Ukraine continues, and while Europe has weathered a couple of winters now fairly successfully after the loss of Russian natural gas, they're still scrambling to figure out what their long-term solution is. They're not going to go back to Russian natural gas supplies. So that continues to have an impact here on us locally because they're importing a lot of liquefied natural gas, continuing to do that from the U.S. We continue to have supply chain issues. It seems like we get something worked out and then something new pops up. And I think that's just a factor of us being part of a global economy. And when there's unrest anywhere, it can really impact our supply chains here. So unfortunately, I think this is kind of a way of life for the foreseeable future for us. We know that there have been inflation concerns, even though it seems to be moderating now, but that's had a big impact on where interest rates have been and are. And after, enjoying many, many years of very low interest rates, I think unfortunately that's behind us for a little bit. So that's impacting the cost. As we know, we're very capital intensive businesses, and that has an impact on us. We continue to see volatility in fuel prices, including natural gas. And I've got a couple of charts I think that will show that in pictures here in just a moment. And then new to the list is obviously the Israel-Hamas war and the news reports of conflicts that are, branching off from that. So how broad is that going to spread, and what could that mean for global economies? I think that's a big wild card right now. So we continue to watch what's going on globally. So I mentioned a chart. When we look at natural gas, natural gas continues to be an important fuel when it comes to electricity production and generation here in the United States. And so we put together some perspective. If you look at the yellow line, that was the outlook for what natural gas prices were going to be over the next few years, 2 years ago when we were talking. The dark blue line represents what we were talking about last year, and obviously we had talked about some very significant increases year over year. And then finally, the red line shows where we're at in our most recent business plan projections. And so I think the story here is that prices have come down from those significant highs of a year ago, but they have not returned to where they were 2 years ago. And I think that we're probably going to see those prices stay elevated, again, because of the global demand for natural gas. And then while we have a lot of natural gas production here in the United States, domestically, we haven't invested in our natural gas pipeline infrastructure. So getting the supply to where it needs to be continues to be an issue, and it can drive local prices up pretty significantly. And if we look at the next slide, when we look at our outlook for electricity prices, you see that the impact of natural gas really is borne out in the outlook for electricity prices into the future. So again, those same perspectives of 2 years ago, a year ago, and currently, and prices still remain about 30% above where we were a couple of years ago. So on the next slide, we put together a little bit of perspective about, what does that mean for where we think, where we did end our average rate this year to members. And so the average for 2023 represents a combination of all 18 members. And I recognize that there's, a range around that. You all tend to be, I think, maybe $4 to $5 a megawatt hour lower on average, given the composition of your membership. But this is everybody. So if we look at the $85 this year, and you'll notice that top red bar represents our distribution cost, because we own substations that serve member load. And then that's also inclusive of the member services, where members have come together and made a decision that it's more cost effective to do things together as the 18 and do that through Hoosier. So if you set aside that total combined $4 of our rate, you'll see that $81 represents our generation, power supply, and transmission cost of business. We took a look and are comparing that to the national average. And we got that information from the Energy Information Administration. And you'll see that for the nation as a whole, we compare to, our 81 compares to about $90 a megawatt hour. Now, the national average is inclusive of all utilities. So whether that's cooperatives, municipals, investor-owned utilities. And I show this not because we feel great about our cost. We don't. We would love to see them lower, and we work towards that. But rather, this is just perspective to show that the issues that we're experiencing aren't unique to Hoosier or Indiana or the Midwest. They really are national issues that we're dealing with. And a little bit later, I have some historical perspective as well as kind of our future outlook to build upon this. So let's talk about reliability. Last year when we were together, I was sharing NERC, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation. They prepare an outlook for the winter season that we're headed into right now. We find ourselves into actually right now, December, January, and February. They also prepare an outlook before each summer season as well. And they kind of take stock of where they see the bulk power system for North America, which is the United States and Canada from their perspective. How ready is that system for the upcoming season? And so I think when we talked about this last year, the story is pretty consistent this year. The concerns that NERC raised last year continue to be of concern to them. And that includes that, there are significant portions of the bulk power system in North America that are at risk of insufficient supplies during very peak winter conditions. Also, there are areas of the bulk power system where fuel supplies continue to be at risk during extreme weather, especially during long duration cold weather events. And they also noted this year that load forecasting, given the extreme weather events that we've been experiencing over the past few years, is becoming more and more complex and difficult just to know what load is going to be. And at the same time, more of the generation resources in the country are now intermittent and dependent on that same weather. So predicting your load and also predicting what generation is going to be available is becoming more and more difficult. One of the things NERC is also new this year, keeping an eye on, is whether or not we may see curtailment of electricity transfers across areas during high periods of need and high demand. And so think about this, we've talked in the past that Hoosier is situated in MISO, a multi-state region, regional transmission organization area. Well, to the east, there's a multi-state region called PJM. To the west, there's a multi-state region known as SPP, or the Southwest Power Pool. And there are others in the United States, but these are the ones that we interact with most closely. And so at any given time, MISO may be sending power over to PJM or importing power in from PJM. And the same thing goes with SPP. NERC is kind of keeping an eye on, well, what if one region has enough power to share with another region, but they're not sure and they want to keep that rather than send it to a region that is already in need today? How will that play out? So we haven't seen that happen yet, but it's just something they're keeping an eye on about how the regional transmission organizations may interact in the future if supplies get tighter and tighter. If there's a positive in this, NERC did note that some of the new cold weather standards that they've put in place for this winter in particular that are aimed at improving coordination between generation and bulk power system operators are helpful. And also generator winter prep is on a positive trend. So if you think about these last two items, it's really kind of focused on the southern part of the US where they haven't necessarily always planned for cold weather events. We know here in Indiana, we've always planned for very cold winters and hot summers, but that's not true everywhere. But I think it's coming on everybody's radar screen. So if we look at the next slide, this is a picture of NERC's assessment for this winter. And this shows the areas that they view as being at elevated risk or high risk during extreme weather. And when we looked at this map last year, we talked about MISO was on there, as well as Texas and parts of New England. But the story is this map is growing in terms of NERC's concerns, rather than getting smaller. And so this year, I mentioned SPP that sits just to the west of us. They're now an area that NERC views as having an elevated risk of maybe having insufficient supplies. PJM has been added. The area in New England has been expanded, and Quebec is now shown there as well. And I think that this just goes to show that we've talked about in our area that generation retirements have outpaced additions over the past several years. And that's leading to smaller and smaller reserve margins, or think of that as excess generation that's available to be called on in the footprint in the circumstance of an unexpected, generator outages or unexpected high load. That excess generation is much, much smaller than it used to be. So there's much smaller margin of error in the system. And that circumstance is actually taking place across the country. So it's not just a Midwest issue, it's a national issue. So NERC's view of MISO, because that's the one that's of key importance to us since that's where we're situated, their view is that MISO actually entered this winter season better off than we were last year. And that's in large part due to new wind and natural gas generation that came on in the footprint since last year, as well as the extension of some of the planned closure dates for some fossil plants. And so those have been extended a little bit. So all in all, heading into this winter, MISO had about 9 gigawatts more generating capacity. And just for perspective, we used to talk about the Merom generating station, and that was about 1,000 megawatts or 1 gigawatt. So this is equivalent to 9 Merom stations across the 15-state footprint, if that gives you a little bit of perspective. MISO has also taken a few steps that I think will set the stage for improved resource adequacy and reliability into the future. And one of the things that they've done is they've looked at the load projections and the amount of generation to meet peak load, not just during the hottest time in the summer. So if you think about it, MISO used to believe that if they had enough generation to meet demand on the hottest summer day in the footprint, then they would be okay every other day of the year. And that's not true anymore, given the extreme weather and the winter loads, as well as I mentioned, the more intermittent nature of some of the generation that's out there to meet those needs. So MISO has taken a view now, we call it their seasonal construct. And what that means is they look at each of the 4 seasons of the year. They look at the expected load, what could happen. They look at the generation availability, and they make sure that there's going to be adequate resources season by season. Coupled with that is also a view that they're taking, a step that they're taking, that they're not giving generating resources the same amount of credit to produce energy all seasons of the year. And I think solar is probably the easiest type of resource to think of as an example. So we know here in Indiana, solar doesn't produce a lot of energy in the winter. And so they give very little credit to a solar resource in the wintertime. Now, in the summertime, it'll produce more energy, and so they'll give it more credit. And I think that all of those steps, and they're not just speaking on solar, they're doing that for every resource. But I think that that's a good step to making sure that the resources that are on the system are going to be there to produce the energy that we're planning on and counting on. And then finally, another step that MISO is taking, I mentioned that those reserve margins have gotten tighter and tighter. And so MISO is increasing the amount of reserves that we have to come up with and contribute to the system. So they're trying to build that back up so that the footprint as a whole has more generation sitting in the wings if it's needed. Great step for reliability, it's not cost-free. So, that comes with a cost to it. So all in all, I think those are good steps MISO's taking. Are they perfect? No. Do they make planning for us very difficult? Yes, the rules are constantly changing. Just when you think you have resources shored up for a couple of years from now, the rules change and you're like, oh, I need to come up with a little bit more for that. But I think it's good all in all. MISO did its own assessment, and I won't go through all of this. I touched on a little bit of it already, but basically MISO's view of its readiness and its how it will stack up during the winter season matched with NERC's. So I think it's pretty good. It's not that NERC saw issues and MISO said everything's great. They were both consistent in their views. So if we move on to the next slide, thank you. Let's talk a little bit about our resource portfolio and the transition that we're in. And so a couple of things that we were able to lock in this past year that I'm really excited about, I want to share with you. The first of which is we have a new purchase of power agreement from the Merom station from Hallador Energy through May of 2028. So we will continue to take power from Merom station for an additional 2.5 years. And that's an important part of our transition into the future because it's very hard to bring new generation online these days. I talked about how retirements have been outpacing replacements. Well, part of the issue with replacements is that it takes you a very long time to get through what is known as the MISO interconnection queue to be able to interconnect a new generation resource to the grid. So there's a big backlog there, as well as just all of the delays that come about with construction. Pretty much anything is going to get an environmental, delay around it. Nobody wants anything in their backyard. It's very tough. So having a contract for a shorter period of time to help bridge that is super important for us. The other item is that we partnered with Wolverine Power Cooperative, a generation and transmission co-op like Hoosier that's located in Michigan, on identical purchase power agreements with Holtec from the Palisades nuclear facility. And this is really exciting because this will set the stage for what will be a first in the nation's history, and that is to bring a nuclear plant that was on the path to decommissioning back into service. And so, like I said, we're super excited about it. If people ask me in my 28 plus years with Hoosier, what's the one thing you've been most excited about? This is it. I think this has tremendous opportunities in the future for members. It's a zero carbon resource that's very, very reliable and produces a lot of low cost energy when it's up and going. So we're very excited. It's not going to be easy. This is, as I mentioned, anything that's a first in the nation's history. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission will have to sign off on the restart of the plant. So that's taking place, and we expect the plant to be up and going in early 2026, which is when our purchase power agreement starts, and it will run through March of 2053. Also during that period of time, there will be a relicensing that will take place, which is not uncommon for nuclear facilities. Those happen to the fleet pretty frequently. So very excited about that. So with these two items and then everything else that we put into place, I would just share with you that we have kind of shored up the members' capacity requirements, substantially all their needs through 2032. And last year when we were together, I think I was sharing we were at 2025. So we've made some pretty significant strides this past year. And of course, we're still actively working on opportunities for 2033 and beyond, and hope to have some things to bring to the board yet this year. I already mentioned the challenges around the MISO market rules that keep changing. And, you know, we haven't really seen a reduction in member interest in distributed energy opportunities. We see those actually increasing, as well as, you know, continued focus on environmental, social, and governance requirements that they themselves have in their companies. So that's pretty much the same. So maybe just one additional slide. I mentioned I'd share some perspective about where we're ending our rate this year and our outlook for the future. And I think it's kind of important, we talked about this in the Hoosier boardroom, to look at some perspective about where we've come from. And if you think about a period of time, let's go back to 2012, and a period of time of about 10 to 11 years, beginning in 2012, we really experienced a decade of rate stability. And that was really founded in healthy reserve margins in MISO. So if you had new load growth, if there was an upset on the system, there was plenty of excess generation kind of sitting in the wings ready to jump in, which provides stability for all of us. During this period of time, we saw really moderate load growth. And I think over that period of time in total, the members' energy sales grew about 5%. So that's less than 0.5% per year on average. So really moderate load growth. So we didn't need a lot of new generation during that period of time. As a nation, we saw a lot of advancements in natural gas production through horizontal fracturing, or fracking as we've come to call it. And that's provided an abundant supply of natural gas and kept natural gas prices very, very low over this entire period. We kind of forget that before 2012, we saw a lot of natural gas volatility in the market. But that wasn't so much the case in this decade that we're looking at. Also, utility scale wind and solar costs were declining, which makes sense because with all of the state and federal incentives that were directed towards those industries to make them more commercially cost effective, we saw that taking place. And then finally, we saw the growing interest in decarbonization, not just from a regulatory standpoint, but really from a societal standpoint, what folks are interested in terms of their power supply and just the overall environmental footprint in total. And so this decade of stability, when you think about when we were working on our long-range resource plan and developing that in 2019, And it was approved in early 2020, where we decided to pursue a more diverse path and step away from future investments in Merom Station as far as ownership. You can see that was the backdrop that we had when we were working on that. And so when I was talking to you about that, when I came out in 2020, I was saying that our outlook for rates really at that time was to be in the $70 to $71 range. And we actually saw that in the first year post-decision, and that's directly related to the investment changes and mindset that we made at Merom Station. But then the world changed around us, and we've been put into this period of extreme volatility. And we know that's been brought about by the pandemic and ongoing disruptions around that. We talked about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and that's been referred to as setting off a global energy crisis, which I think is appropriate to call it that. We talked about the increase in extreme weather events. During this window of time, the past few years, we know we've seen inflation reach 40-year highs. And I've already mentioned the circumstance of the resource retirements versus replacements. And so lots of things changed and had dramatic impacts on the cost of our business. And I bring this up because sometimes I get the question or the comment that, you know, you made the decision around your long-range resource plan and around Merom, and you said costs were going to go down. But costs have gone up because you made that decision. And that's not accurate. I understand how those dots can get connected because the timing was so close together. But that isn't the case. As I mentioned, the first year we actually did see those savings. But we took a look and we said today, what would our rate be? What would our costs look like if we had continued to hold Merom Station and invest in it and have to, you know, reprice coal contracts during times when coal prices were 200% higher than they had been, which was also in this extreme volatility period. And we estimate that our rates would be about $12 a megawatt hour higher than what they are today to members, or about 14%. And so I just point that out because, again, I understand how the dots get connected, but I want to make sure that we understand what the drivers are, and that's not the case. So what do we see in the future? And in our most recent business, I wish I had a very accurate crystal ball, but my crystal ball has been so wrong. But I do go back sometimes, you know, along with that comment I get, well, you know, you said rates were going to be $70 to $71, and now they're, you know, 85. And I say, well, if I come to you and I said, you know what, I think we're going to have a global pandemic, and I think that Russia's going to invade Ukraine, and we're going to have a global energy crisis. Inflation is going to go up to 40-year highs. If I had said all of that, you would have told me I was crazy. There's no way. But we know it all happened. It all happened. So where do I think we're going to be? So based on our most recent outlook, our best view is that we think rates are probably going to hang about where they're at today. I don't see a tremendous opportunity for them to go down a lot, just because of the drivers. And those include that we're going to continue to see decarbonization, and that's going to result in continued resource retirements. Now, the timing of those may be delayed a little bit, but I don't think we're going to be on a path where all of a sudden all that retirement is reversed. I don't see that yet. Also, we've seen utility scale wind and solar, the cost of those projects go up by 75% since 2021. And when you think about those project developers, they're experiencing tariffs on solar panels and the uncertainty around that. They're experiencing significantly higher than anticipated interconnection cost to interconnect those projects into the grid through MISO. Interest rates are up, and so their project costs are up as well. So there's a lot of drivers there, but I think you're going to keep those costs elevated for a while. Will they come back down long term? I think so, yes. Will they return to, some of the low 30 pricing that we saw when we first sent out an RFP in 2020? I don't think so. I don't think they'll come back that low. I've already shared our outlook for natural gas and power prices. We talked about that earlier. And then one thing that we have not talked about yet is that there are significant investments that are needed in the nation's electricity grid, just to keep it running reliably at the level that it's at, and then also to expand it to bring new generation online to meet load. So transmission cost is one of the fastest growing cost categories for electric utilities. currently. And the outlook is for that to be the case. So I think we're probably going to be, if you compare that to the period of the decade of stability that we had, our rates, you can just say, are going to be about 10% higher than they were during that period of stability is what our outlook is. And then finally, one last slide. I want to talk about member relations a little bit. And I wanted to just express my appreciation that last year, all 18 member systems extended your wholesale power contracts with Hoosier for an additional 5 years. So those will now go out to January of 2060. And this year is actually Hoosier's 75th anniversary, founded in 1949, created by all of you. And so when you look at that commitment, that brings your commitment to working together with the other distribution co-ops that own Hoosier Energy to over 110 years. And I think that that's phenomenal. And that's another thing that I don't think we should lose sight of. That's a pretty proud business model. And you think about what those before us were facing 110 years ago, or 75 years ago in this case, versus what we face today, could never have foreseen it. But I think the basic premise is sound, that we're better off doing it together than if we were each individually trying to tackle those challenges separately. So I'm very humbled by that, and I'm excited by it. Also, during last year, the Hoosier Board approved a new member flexibility policy, which I think is a very positive step. And that allows member systems to obtain up to 5% of your power requirements from somebody other than Hoosier. And whether that's through some kind of resource that you want to own and place on your system, or if you want to obtain that from somebody else, it really gives you the flexibility to deal with particular unique circumstances that you may have with your membership, while still maintaining the great economies of scale for the other 95% of your supply. So it's all voluntary. Members can use it. They can choose not to use it. You can use it right now. You might choose to use it 10 years from now. That's what flexibility is. And then finally, I wanted to touch on that the board also approved discussing a different long-term relationship with JCREMC. And so JCREMC, their local board came into the Hoosier boardroom and their CEO shared with the Hoosier board what they were really trying to achieve, what they were looking for in a new long-term relationship. And we looked into that and were able to kind of look at something that another G&T distribution co-op had done in Minnesota. And we said, you know what, that may have some merit. That may be what JCREMC, that may be what they're looking for. And so the board approved that we could discuss that. But I want to share that in these conversations, there's some basic premises that are really important. Is that any results of a new relationship have to be sustainable and promote the continued success of the other 17 members and Hoosier Energy. So we're not going to enter into anything that would put that at jeopardy. And any kind of relationship is a customer relationship that we would put into place has to promote, productive and efficient decision-making and cooperation, right? So that has to be part of it. And then finally, because I get this question from among the 17 is, how's it going to impact my rates? Are they going to shift costs to me? And my answer to that is no, because the basic foundation is that any kind of relationship or change cannot have a material adverse impact on the other 17. If it did, I wouldn't bring it forward to the Hoosier board. And when we say no material adverse impact, we're looking at that from a financial standpoint, an operational standpoint, and also a risk standpoint. So if we can come up with something that satisfies this and it's workable for JCREMC, the other 17 members say that looks good, then we're all about going for it. But if we, like any negotiation, if you can't come to an agreement, that's okay too. At least we tried and we had the conversation. And if that happens, they'll just continue to be a member under their existing wholesale power contract, just like they are today. So it's not a foregone conclusion that they're going to become a customer. We're just in the middle of talking about it. The timeline around that, because we also put some boundaries, we don't want the conversations to go on forever. And so the parameters that the board put in place is that, we need to have reached an agreement by the end of this year. If not, we'll say good try, conversations are over. But we're really working towards, I'd say the conversations with JCREMC have been very cordial and productive so far. We're kind of working towards having a term sheet of what a structure could look like for discussion with the Hoosier Energy Board and JCRMC, talk about it with their board in the spring. If that's agreeable to everybody, we would work on definitive agreements that would support that term sheet, and those would come before the Hoosier Energy Board and the JCRMC Board in the fall. And then we could look at an effective date of January of next year. So about a year from now, January 2025. So lots going on at Hoosier. But with all of that, Rob, is there anything that you're going to add that, Glenn, what did I miss?
Oh, you didn't miss anything. I always like to talk about at least one thing about the reliability
Yes.
in 2023. And it was slightly better versus the 7-year average for Decatur County. And we had 5 sustained outages on the transmission side. And for us, we consider sustained greater than 1 minute. Of those 5 sustained, 94 or 93% of that accounted for a squirrel in one of our substations. So that was an aggravating day there. But reliability has gotten better in 2023, not by large amounts. There's definitely work that needs to be done on the system, but we're progressing, so that's a positive.
Rob, on that point, I had a call the other day from a member that said, can we just put a person with a rifle in front of the substation? And I said, oh, I think there's something about guns and substations that probably don't fix it.
I would say some of the reliability requirements and the folks that oversee that would shake their head and probably disapprove. But I like the concept, actually.
Desired results.
Donna, I do have a question.
Yes.
If I look back at this rate, and I think this is important for our board, and we always have discussions about forecasts, and I'll quote a wise man in this room, that, you know, your forecast is probably at its best the minute it's wrote. And then as you go out years, it's an educated guess. But if I look at this, what it's telling me is, from a wholesale standpoint, if nothing changes from when this forecast was, it's going to be relatively stable. But yet then we have a review of the rate design at Hoosier, which would be this year. Any changes would be effective 2026. And I think a lot of times when we see that, we jump to the gun to say, well, that's a rate increase. You know, how are we going to start working that? So let's just say everything meets what's in the forecast and we do a cost of service study. Most likely that would just be shifting energy demand, rolling up a tracker, things like that. They're margin neutral, essentially, in a case where the forecast is actually reality when we get there. Am I wrong by saying that, or is that?
No, I think that's well stated. And so you're right. We made our overall outlook, and this includes our fixed charges too. So
Yep.
cover the narrow cost. This is all right. So to your point, this is our outlook for what that total will be. Now, do we tweak exactly how we collect that? That's what you're talking about.
Yes.
And I would expect there to be smaller impacts now because we're doing it. We just did it 5 years ago.
Yep.
You know, in the past, we might wait 3 years ago, we might wait 10 years or longer to do it. And that resulted in bigger changes when we did review it. So I think that's one thing of doing it more frequently is going to help with that too.
Yep.
So you're very accurate there.
And that does impact us, just to get the board thinking about, you know, we may want to do a cost of service study in this time frame just to see if we want to switch any energy and demand. That's the reason I kind of. And then the other question I have, Rob, is for you, is one thing I get asked continuously about is substation security. What are some things that I guess maybe that we could be telling our members that, you know, Hoosier and that we're doing from a substation standpoint? Is that does not necessarily animals getting in, like
Right.
literally people shooting.
Yeah. No, that's definitely a hot topic across the industry. The issues that happened down in the Carolinas not too long ago, terrorist style attacks, really, you know, taking rifles and shooting at substations. That's a challenge. There are studies ongoing right now through an organization, EPRI, that kind of represents a very large part of the utility sector. And they're looking at how can you put ballistic style barriers up and not overheat your substations. So how high do they have to be? How do you get the right airflows in the winter? How do you protect it in the or in the summer, excuse me. And then what does that look like in the winter? Does that cause heat to build in the chambers and inside the oil? We have folks that through the Department of Homeland Security that are looking at, is there a way to double fence? Should you install cameras? The issue, and I'm not saying cameras they're a bad idea. The issue with cameras is twofold. First and foremost, if it's for, heaven forbid, a gunshot, that's probably going to happen a pretty far distance away. So you may see the point of impact and whatever problem it causes quicker, but it's really not going to deter at that point. So what we're looking at from Hoosier's standpoint, boiling all that down, is can we tie this to our SCADA control and have at least some security around gates so they're not left open? Can we get something to alarms coming in and out of every gate? Because some of the substations have 4 or 5 gates on, right? It's not just one going in sometimes. And that way we can implement a protocol that says, if you're going to go in the gate, an alarm's going to go off, sending it back through SCADA. Therefore, call system control and let us know. And it'll do the same thing on the way out so no one forgets to close the gate, because that's sometimes an issue too, right? Somebody goes out a different gate and they're off to the next job site and the gate gets left open. So in the interim of all the things that are happening around substation security, we're probably going to start with something as simple as alarming the gates to at least ensure that we're not leaving something open. Now, where the industry goes from here, and there's going to be a lot of talk in the coming months, and I do think that that's a vulnerability across the entire country at this point.
Yeah, we actually had one of our guys notice there's a substation for a different utility just down the road, and one of our linemen actually drove by on their way here and noticed that it was open, and we'd called the utility. So yeah, that does it. You were right.
And especially after, an event day, whether it be a storm or even if it's extremely cold and you have 2 and 3 different folks showing up at that substation, I'm not giving it an excuse, but I can see how it happens. That's now part of our winter preparedness, cold weather planning with our crews, that I know we're going to have these kind of storms. We do it in the spring as well, reminding them about substation security. And we do monitor our trucks, so we know where our trucks are. So predominantly we know, if there was an issue, we can reach out to the substation mechanic or whoever may have been and say, hey, don't forget to shut the gate next time, and kind of reinforce the rules, if you will.
Rob, can you speak to, this is a question I get a lot these days. Large scale solar is a hot topic right now. And everyone always wants to know what Hoosier's role in that is or is not. So can you kind of walk the board through that and kind of give a 30,000 foot view? I know that Donna alluded to challenges right now for those projects, interconnection, interest rates, et cetera. But can you kind of talk about where you think that's going and what our role may be in that?
Roll, Jason, from the definition of how are we going to be interested in solar going forward? Okay, great.
Well, I mean, that's the question I have here. If you want to boil it down.
Yeah.
Are you guys causing this solar farm to be built?
There you go.
County number 1. And wait, the other one is, why are we not, and I think I know the answer to this, but everyone may not. Why are we building that here and not in the desert?
Mm-hmm. No, I can.
But we'll just boil it down.
No, I like that. On top of what Donna's already mentioned around the pricing of the solar panels themselves, the supply chain issues that are coming along with the panels, some of the tariffs that are happening to the panels on where they're being produced and how you bring them into the country. Take all of those things that are putting cost pressures on. Another issue with solar ties directly back to the conversation around the new MISO seasonal construct. And before that time, you had the incentives, the tax incentives, the ITC tax incentives they would get towards solar. And so you could get these solar prices that were very depressed, down in the $30 to $35 range on what I would refer to as a utility scale solar project, that 100 megawatt, 150 megawatt solar project. As that has moved forward and those changes were made through MISO, in the winter, solar gets 0 capacity accreditation. So capacity, the ability to generate electricity, that's the capacity piece. It gets a 0 number. So therefore, there's no value and you get no credit for having that particular kind of energy resource in the winter. And it's really the same in the fall and the spring. And it's about 50% of whatever the nameplate says on that in the summer, which that makes sense. 100 megawatt solar farm in the summertime you're going to get an accreditation of about 50 megawatts. There's still nighttime in Indiana, thankfully. So, there's going to be times where it's not going to run. Now, when you start thinking about, is Hoosier going to be a part of these? As the prices have went up and as we've seen different issues with the accreditation, Hoosier is trying to diversify their entire portfolio. What solar brings to the table for the membership is low-cost energy. There's not a lot of capacity there, but there can be low-cost energy. So does it make sense for Hoosier to have a certain amount of its portfolio in solar? It does, as long as the pricing is competitive. If the pricing is not competitive for some different reason, if we can buy another product that's less expensive, we will go that route. We don't have any goals or any kind of mandates from the board of directors or internal to Hoosier that says we're going to be to some number of renewables by a certain date. What we're really focused on is diversifying the portfolio, both from fuel type, whether that be coal, natural gas, wind, solar, nuclear, keep going down the options, and term lengths and style of unit and all of the things you can think about to diversify. So whenever we think solar, we think that it's a great energy resource, but we're not out looking to develop solar farms ourselves. If someone brings an opportunity or responds to our request for proposal when those go out at certain intervals, we definitely review it. And if we think it's a reputable developer and they have proven track record of actually building solar, we'll bring them in and we'll have the conversation to see if it makes sense for our portfolio. But the last thing I'll hit on there that I think is important is when you think about the ability to connect to the MISO grid, the grid that runs across the entire country, if you will, there's a process that you have to follow. And a lot of folks in the development world, and this is what we're seeing now, and this is why some of those questions I believe are coming up. A lot of people decided, I'm going to be a solar developer and I'm going to lease some land. I'm going to get control of that land, whether I buy or lease it, typically try to lease it. And I'm going to put a project together. And then I'm going to then apply to MISO, which is called getting in the queue. And while that's all taking place, I'm going to try to sell this project or get somebody to sign up for it, one or the other. There were thousands of those, to the point that it overcame the MISO queue process. And it started raising the cost for everybody to connect to the grid. And so MISO literally turned that process off. Nobody can apply for new generation currently. Really hope that opens back up at the end of Q1 of 2024, no later than Q2 of 2024. But that was due to a term that I use. People went fishing. They started throwing all these projects out there and they were all solar. And they were trying to see if they could get a bite. Could they get a bite and get somebody interested? Through the new queue reform process, you are now going to have physical control of the land. They've increased the cost for applying or getting into that queue position. And maybe most importantly, if your project doesn't come to fruition in the timeframe you say it is, there's a severe penalty that's going to be applied, which the hope is it prevents some of the fishing, if you will, activities taking place. Hopefully that answered.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just want everybody to hear that because I think that's questions that several of us are fielding. So that was part one. But, the other thing that I always get is why are we building solar in Indiana? It should all be in the desert.
Well, they are building it in the desert out west. But when you think about the transmission infrastructure that would be required to remove that energy in the desert to Indiana, way cost prohibitive.
So this is kind of on the line of Jason's. If an individual or aggressive sales rep for solar said, is Hoosier partnering? We're partnering with Hoosier. Would that be a true or false statement?
We have.
We're partnering with your local REMC.
Uh,
Partner is a strong word.
Yeah, we don't partner.
Okay.
We are purchase power off takers. And we do that through what's called a PPA. Anyone that says that they're partnering with Hoosier to build or develop a solar farm, that's in my opinion, an overstatement of what is actually taking place.
Gotcha.
We may be in negotiations for whatever the electric offtake is for that, but partnering is not what we would do. Now, the reason they may get there or the reason they may be able to pass the red face test if they want to argue the other counterpoint. They may have applied to Hoosier to interconnect to our transmission system at a smaller voltage than what MISO controls. So if they want to make the connection that we've applied to Hoosier and Hoosier has requested data from their solar farm and that we're studying that on our system to say that we're partnering, still it's a pretty good push. But that would be how they're working with Hoosier in any way, shape, or form on the development side, and where they're interconnecting to our transmission system.
So that and also I would suggest that people use partnership in a different manner. And what I would hate to see happen is we say, well, no, we didn't partner. And then someone find out later that, well, Hoosier's taken, a PPA with them, 5 years from now, right? Well, I thought you guys said you didn't partner with them. Well, we didn't partner with them, but we are offsetting. We are taking some of that offset. So that's why it's a kind of I think the answer is no, but it's very complicated.
And I like the term, excuse me, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Purchase power agreement. The only involvement Hoosier has in this development is a purchase power agreement for the offtake of the energy produced or something along those lines. Because if we were to partner with someone to develop a solar project, obviously that would go through our board of directors and that would be things that would be known, with amongst our local members and our boards, because we would have to make that investment and that would be a fairly significant investment. So there's the check and balance for if Hoosier were to actually partner and be in a development process. Jason would come back and say, hey, here's what's going on at Hoosier. They're thinking about doing this and here's where that project is going to reside.
So the third party definition of partner and Hoosier's definition of partner could be significantly different based on that.
Yes,
That's-
parties
Partners is
take a lot of liberty.
Very, yeah,
Term.
I agree.
because they're aggressive sales reps. I've had 3 members contact me within the last month. And they were told they were partnering. I'm like, oh, I'll find
I've
out.
had the
I didn't
same,
get the answer, but now I know.
yeah, and I've had the exact same question a couple of times.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
If I understand correctly, Hoosier has nothing to do with building it, developing it. They might buy the power when it's done.
Yeah, as of right
At
now.
this point in time, yeah.
If we ever do decide to build it and develop it, it'll go through the board and it'll be known at the time that, we make a recommendation. If the board sees fit, we'll move forward.
Just like,
It's just like anything else. If somebody comes along and offers power at a good price, Hoosier's interested. If it's not, they're not.
Don or Rob, I don't know if it's a question more than an observation. I'm intrigued by the Wolverine Power Corporation and the decommit or the whatever, reinstitution of the power. Well, it seems like there's, societally speaking, there's a huge reluctance for nuclear. Don, I hear you say zero carbon, incredibly reliable. Is that reluctance driven by 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and to a lesser degree, Marble Hill? Is that, because I'm hearing all the cost on everything else is going up. I know Marble Hill was a cost fiasco a long time ago, but I have to believe in the passage of time since that, nuclear has become more economically competitive, but it still seems to not be embraced by anyone.
I think you very much hit it on the head. I think it's just the fear of those past circumstances. If you look at the safety record of nuclear, it's really outstanding. But there's a fear around what happened in the past. So I think that's part of it. That's why there's kind of this, anytime you hear nuclear.
Because it could happen.
It could happen. When you look at the number of times it has, it's very, very small compared to the operating fleet, And when you think about Chernobyl, my understanding is that the safety around that facility was not what the safety requirements are in the United States. So there's, each one of them has its own certain thing. The thing about nuclear too is, that decade of stability when there was plenty of excess generation out there, people weren't needing to build new things. Well, if they were building a new nuclear unit, we heard about all the cost overruns, right? To build a new large nuclear unit. And that has to do with all of the changing rules. Like you can be constructing something new in a new nuclear facility and then they change the rules and you have to go back and you have to, so it's kind of it's a bad process from the United States. So there's discussion now about can they streamline that and make it safe and yet more effective and cost effective. So I think that's the other part, is that there's been a lot of overruns on the new large units. But what I think the promise is first of all, we're excited about Palisades because there's no new construction risk. It's already there. It's been shown to be reliable. It's already got interconnection to the grid. So we're excited about that. And actually the administration would like to see more of that happen, especially in Europe. You know, Europe started back up a lot of their coal units because of the situation with Russia. Would much rather see them restart nuclear or not retire nuclear from a carbon perspective. But if we really as a nation or globally are serious about going zero carbon for electricity production, nuclear has to be it. I mean, will there be a place for hydrogen? Maybe, yeah, maybe, but I don't think it's going to be the only thing. But I think it's going to be the small modular technologies that we need to get up and going and commercialized, because they don't have the risk that the very large units have. And you can add those in small increments as load grows, and you can place them distributed, which gives you a lot of security and diversity and so forth. So if we're going to be zero carbon, we've got to talk nuclear. We got to get away from the fear of it and work towards it. That's my opinion.
To stay with Palisades, service date from 26 to 53, 27 years. That seems odd to me. Is there a maintenance thing happening in 27 years? Why?
No, that's a good question. So it really has to do with their permitting. And so they're licensed to operate the facility. So their next renewal will either be in 31 or 33. So Holtec is having a conversation with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission because of this approximately 2 years that the plant wasn't running when it was, starting down the decommissioning path, to say, hey, we think the current operating license really should be extended 2 years because we have 2 years additional left. And then it would look at the next relicensing, which would be 20 years beyond that. So it's really the relicensing cycle. Yeah, good question.
How are we able to get the opportunity to get a nuclear plant that's not next to us, which nobody wants, and two, lock it up for a while when we're not anywhere close to that?
Yeah, so that question comes up a lot, and this is what I will say about that. I give all the credit to Wolverine. Their CEO was actually following what was going on in Michigan. Michigan is really in a crunch when it comes to generation. And so he was watching what was happening with Palisades, and the fact that the IOU, that the investor-owned utility that was taking the output from the plant, didn't want to do that anymore. And so the owner of the plant, given the fact that capacity was pretty cheap, we talked about that decade of stability. It's like, I don't know if we're going to recover costs. Let's just sell it. Sold it to Holtec. And that's Holtec's business, is to buy plants that are set for decommissioning and then to do the decommissioning work, right? So that's what this business unit does. So to go back, the CEO at Wolverine was watching this happen, and he was like, I don't know I don't know why the IOU is not interested in that. And he got an introduction to the folks at Holtec who had no idea what cooperatives were, didn't even know we existed, had only worked with the investor-owned utility, came to learn that the investor-owned utility had not necessarily been on the up and up with them about the way things worked, and said, we want to work with the co-ops, and so signed exclusivity. So Wolverine looked at the total of the plant and said, that's too big for us to do alone. We need another partner. We want to have a co-op partner. And when they looked around at co-op partners, they were looking for a G&T that had needs. We have needs in the future. And a G&T that thought like them and could come together and meet the tight timelines that this requires to consider it and make the decision and work together. And they looked at several other G&Ts, started out thinking it might be a group. And he called me and he said, I really just want it to be the two of us because I think it's going to need to be the two of us to get it done. And we said, we're in, we're all in. What Wolverine would tell you, and they're very gracious about this, we say, we never would have had this opportunity without Wolverine in Michigan. But Wolverine will tell you that they couldn't have done it without Hoosier. And that is the beauty of co-ops working together. not kind of bickering among each other about who's going to get one up on the other, but saying, how can we combine our teams together and go after what is a phenomenal opportunity for both of us? So I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, but.
Yeah, we jumped in the vehicles and drove up to Michigan and spent a day and a half, toured the facility, laid eyes on everything. And, you know, during our conversations, both at the facility and trying to figure out what the right mix was going to be and how we were going to interact in this, it was very much an extension of Hoosier's team. We thought the same. We had the same kind of mindset on where we thought capacity prices were going, what we thought this opportunity looked like. It was a pretty interesting time. And from that point forward, we worked hand in hand, what felt like daily, for a number of weeks to get to the point of actually having a PPA ready to sign. But it went really, really well with them.
I looked through it, it looked like we made a good, quick decision and didn't screw around. That's why we were picked, right?
Yeah, and I give credit to the Hoosier Energy Board to be able to, you know, seize on these opportunities that come up that are really time sensitive. And, you know, we have a board that really digs in and makes a decision in the time period that we have to make it in. Using the best information we have, whether that's a yes or whether it's a no. But I always know that that's something in our hip pocket that's super important.
Yeah, and I was gonna speak on that.
I thought it was
Same.
like a pretty good deal.
Yeah, same thing. When I look at reliable, affordable energy I represent our members, right? And for that length of time, I don't necessarily credit Wolverine for all this. I credit you guys' leadership, and Jason, you're included in that too. So thank you for bringing something that will impact our members for a while.
For many
I mean,
years.
this, I don't think we could even express to our membership how this impacts them for the next 27 years. So thank you for your leadership. I know you guys are humble and don't like to talk about that, but we appreciate it. So.
And we're going to be fortunate enough that Wolverine CEO and Kelly Trystrom, both of which came and talked to our board, we know at the board forum about the opportunity before we made the decision. They're going to be able to join us at our annual meeting this year. So,
Great.
jointly from them. And then I have to turn around the next day and go to Wolverines. It was a trade-off.
Reciprocal.
That's right. That's right.
Do we know, is it gonna be true 50-50 or are we gonna be able to get more than that?
You know, right now,
It depends on how much power plant produces once they get it back up and running.
well, so the plant is what 805 megawatts is the rated capacity on it, and we'll decide the final split of that between Wolverine and Hoosier by the summer. And so I think, you know, Wolverine will take maybe just a smidge that's the majority, or maybe a little bit more that's the majority. But either way, we're fine. We're fine with either way it goes. So.
I have one last question. I'll let either one of you address it. There's a little thing coming up in the fall called a presidential election. Obviously, everything, all the forecasting you're doing, and I'm not trying to get into a political thing, but do you see any major risks or any major rewards for what the outcome of that could be in the fall?
Yeah, the way I look at presidential elections and the impact on our business is that they tend to kind of maybe take the foot off the accelerator of some things or put it on the accelerator. But in the long term, they really don't change direction that much. So as soon as I say that, something else happens. But one of the things we haven't talked about this evening is that there are proposed EPA regulations out there that to reduce carbon emissions from not just new natural gas and coal-fired plants, they assume there aren't going to be any new coal plants, but existing. And if those regulations actually become final, I don't even know how the nation provides enough electricity. But it can't happen. It's based on technology that doesn't exist today. It's based on infrastructure that hasn't been built yet. And so I say that because that's very much a goal of this administration are those regulations. So you can see things get accelerated that you have to deal with. Another administration may back off of those for a little bit. But I think in total, decarbonization is a path that the world is on. It's just a matter of how quickly and how rationally we go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think most of the world would agree with that when you look at it from a rational standpoint. I think everybody wants to get there. It's just that some want to get there between now and next Thursday. And others want to get there between now and 2050.
My point is the first thing that I'm responsible for is the reliability of and supplying power, right? And what's been proposed, I can't do that, you know, and so that's my first and foremost. And at this point, it's not even a matter of cost, because I don't know how you estimate the cost of stuff that hasn't even been constructed and built. And all of us doing it at one time, that's got to just be astronomical.
You had some comparisons there about the electricity comparisons with the, just the residential. What about the industrial? I know it's pretty hard to, you know, one industry must be bigger than the other, but is there some kind of a comparison to do with industries? Or
Oh, you mean our total, when I was comparing our average rate to the national average rate?
national,
Yeah, you know, the EIA, what we showed up there was a combination of all that among our members. But EIA does produce information for industrial, commercial, and residential. So they do break out some of the details of that.
Okay.
Yeah, so they do. They have a lot of granularity in their comparisons.
I had several questions that were already answered. One of them, though, that I was thinking about was the recent cold spell that we had. What criteria does MISO typically use to issue a max gen alert during the winter? Because this, from what I understand, this was the 5th occurrence of the longest spell of sub-zero wind chills. And there was no issue with the max alert.
Yeah, so I'll do it at the high level, and then Rob is going to have to do.
Okay.
He'll fill in the details and he'll correct everything that I say. But I think the story this go around, Steve, because this was really the scenario that NERC had the concern about, right? Sustained colder than normal temperatures. I think part of what happened is it was happening over a weekend and a holiday. There was a lot of preparation. You know, multi-states were watching it happen and getting things in order. Of course, MISO issued its conservative operations, which is not uncommon pretty much any time of the year, which says things could get tight, so don't touch anything, don't work on anything that you could break or mess up. Just kind of leave it all alone. It never got beyond that. That's Don's highly technical explanation. Don't mess it up. Don't touch it, that's it. And then the other thing is that wind out west was just phenomenal. Wind was just churning. Right. And so they didn't even need to call on our gas units much. And so that's my 50,000 foot level. Now, what needs to happen for them to call on a max gen alert?
Yeah, there are indications inside of their tariff that talks about how they set those different levels. And what they see, or what they're looking at really, Steve, is what's the health of PJM? What's the health of SPP? What units do we have online currently? And what is not online that we can turn on if we need it? And then the next step underneath that is gas flowing? Are there any restrictions on the natural gas system? And has anyone notified MISO? Because all power plants are in constant contact with MISO. And a lot of it's without phone, just they're wired into, think of it that way, into the control system of the station. If they see a unit starting to struggle or get derated because it has a problem of some kind, and that's starting to happen across a region, here's the next layer. So the last, what I refer to as the scary announcements, as you start talking about rolling blackouts and actual shedding of load, comes whenever they see load demand outpacing forecast, and all of those other things are happening at the same time. That's when they call on the load modifying resources first, which are the industrial commercial customers that have signed up to shed load in those kind of events and get compensated for that. And if you think back to the December 22nd issue of last year, that storm came on pretty quick. It wasn't really talked about much prior to. It developed and it hit. And that's what happened in that event. And around 5:30 or 6 o'clock, you saw the notification from MISO that enacted the LMRs. And you could watch it on the, if you ever look at the MISO app, don't get started if you don't want to, it'll drive you crazy, but you could actually see it happen. They called the LMRs, demand is continuing to climb, and all of a sudden, everything just turns and starts to come back. And so what they do is they send pricing signals along with that too, and we'll jump into all that, but they make the price higher to cause more people to have to run and get other people to turn their things off.
Thanks. Anyone else have any other questions? Well, we thank you for coming out and being part of board meeting tonight. So thanks for the presentation and answering all the questions.
Thanks so much for having us. We always
Thank you.
appreciate the time together, so.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Hey, there's a pie over there.
Yeah.
Take up a whole pie home.
Each.
For some chicken? You know you were gonna wanna eat the chicken on this barrel.
We'll make great leftovers tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thanks
again.
for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks.
Rob, as always. We'll see you.
Yes, yes, yes.
Good engagement.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You said.
All right, continuing onward then,
Yeah, so I'm going to actually just combine both of them and tell you we had CPR training. I can't remember the actual statistics, but that's, you know, all of our folks are certified to go through this training. So anyways, that was a cool moment. We just did this yesterday. So there we go.
Everybody, everybody's CPR.
Yeah, it's through IEC. So we do a full one every, is it 3 years, Jeannie?
First aid.
Like a first aid full one, and then we always do like refresher classes every single year, Jeannie?
For CPR, first aid is just every 3 years.
Is it everybody or just
Everybody.
everybody? It's good to know, so if I keel over here, that I don't have to worry about not being.
Have some certified folks.
Just so you know,
Do I
I
get to-
won yesterday.
Do I get to win?
Yeah, we had to do a test and we did like a Kahoot. Have you guys ever done a Kahoot?
She always wins these Kahoot
What's
things.
a
And it's like it's an app on your phone and they like put together a bunch of questions. You have to read the question and you have to match the symbol to your phone. And some people don't realize like the faster you answer, the better your score.
Oh.
But you have to get it right. And the faster you are.
So she's not the best at CPR, she just remembered.
Yeah, I just wanted to-
She's good at apps on her phone.
Like, don't ask me to save your life, but I did win. Yeah. I can tell someone how to save it.
She knows how to do it, she just can't.
Yep. For your information, who's got questions regarding the topics that are included there?
Matt, I have a question for you. On the check register this month or in December, we started to see some LMR payments going out. Can you kind of walk, just real brief, is that for the year? I didn't realize that they were gonna be direct cash payments.
Chris.
I thought they were gonna be like off the,
No, so those happen every quarter.
okay.
So, yes, the two people that signed up every quarter, they sign up for a specific amount by season. And so depending on what they sign up for, they get that amount of that check every quarter.
But they're matching the seasonal construct.
Yes,
That's how that's.
that is correct.
So I thought it would be like a bill credit or something. I didn't realize it was actually.
It's a pass through.
Yep.
So essentially we get a credit on our bill and we.
You're getting credit from Hoosier and then you're issuing the cash.
Correct.
Okay. And right now you only have two.
And we have the same two signed up for this year. Well, it's kind of odd because you have to sign up so early, but you have to sign up by February 1st for the 24-25 season. So both of those two have already signed up again for the next season.
No new ones.
No, but one actually contributed more and then the other one went down a little bit. So we're still in better shape than we were last year, but yeah, that's every quarter.
Okay.
And we do have one of them who want to start receiving it by, like just an electronic transfer. The other prefers a check so we can still have engagements with them, and still keep that relationship open, but the other one says, just give me my money in my account. So.
Anything else for your information? You good? Go forward. All right. The next item then, we'll approve last month's meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, the same. All right, the minutes have been approved. Brett, the CEO update.
So I wanted to go over a couple things, and then I'm going to suggest we go over the metrics in general for the year. The main things to note, we ended up, I think just shy of 3% less than budget in KWH, and it was a very quiet year. We had no major storms. Other than that, honestly, the metrics, there's nothing really there. So I was going to skip that, but I do want to go over this. Okay. So a couple things from a standpoint. So 2024, we are working on a company project list with goals. That's how we set our goals. So that is being worked. Couple of the big things that are going to be in there. So number one is this culture transformation and company vision. So I wanted to kind of make sure the board understood what we're doing there. So last year we spent pretty much at least 8 months of the year really working on with the leadership team, interacting with Lena from Hoosier on creating a culture statement and a plan to invite employees into culture transformation. So we spent pretty much 8 months last year at the leadership level. Now we're getting ready. So our time frame to push this out to the rest of the company is that first or second week in March is what it's looking like. So again, we spent a lot of time there. And when we plan on, I will probably invite you all we are going to, the day we do this reset. So we're going to kind of do a culture reset day. We're going to close down the office. We're going to go through it very, very clearly so folks are aware of it. We have some swag, I guess is the right word, created for the motto and the culture statement and all that. So I probably will, it's not, I don't think mandatory, but if you do want to come for that, you'd be more than welcome to come. So I'll let you know about that. That's where we're going with that. The company vision at the same time, I'm going to cast that to everyone so they know where our goals and projects are coming from. Fiber project, as you all know, that's like a big thing that we've spent a lot of time on, and we're going to spend a lot of time tonight going through where we're at on that. And then another thing I wanted to talk about real quickly, I mentioned this a couple meetings ago. Our service and work order process is not as efficient as what we would like. It passes a lot of different hands. It's a very manual process. Literally a year or two ago, we created a brown folder and a checklist, and the work order and service order kind of follows to the next person with that. So with the implementation of workflow management in an ISC, which automates that process, I think it's very, very important that we actually rework CI this process, right? So do a Kaizen event, look at how we can simplify the process and streamline it. And so we've tried to do this for the last 3 or 4 years. And the problem is it's very, very, very complicated. It involves almost every department in the company. And therefore, why you're not seeing an opening for the project manager at this point is because I'm going to use those dollars to pay for their consultant. So we did find a consultant. It is Toyota, believe it or not. Toyota out of Columbus has a division where they actually do consulting for Kaizen events. So what they'll do is they'll come in, they train our team. It's a 3-day event. Well, they'll come in, train us, and then they'll help facilitate an event to get us to the point where we can fix this process. That way, when we go in, which I'm assuming right now, Crystal may or may not know this, but she's going to be sort of leading up that, trying to get that work management and NISC going. What kind of look did you get? Anyways, that we have the new process that we can put it into. This will be a huge company change. I mean, right now we are literally shuffling papers from desk to desk and Post-it notes. This is going to go all through the system to the point where all of our guys have iPads now. They use them daily for mapping. And so they'll get work orders and things like that through their iPads. We don't have to shuffle papers. We do know in the past, there's been issues where service work orders will fall through the cracks and we'll get a call from a member, where are you guys at on this? We're like, yeah, good question, right? So I think from an efficiency standpoint, it's a very frustrating process. I know when I first started, I don't think there was anyone in the company that knew every single step because it's so segmented. In fact, we laid it out a couple months ago. And if you look at all the different bottlenecks and handoffs, it's ugly. It needs to be fixed. So anyway, we have that scheduled. I think it's coming up like the second week in February. So we'll be doing that. I just wanted you guys to know that because you will see those dollars come through. Again, I'm going to hold off on hiring that position until we make up the dollars it's going to cost to do this project.
So you mentioned it was, what was 3-day, it's a 3-day Kaizen event?
It's a 3-day
That
Kaizen
includes,
event.
you mentioned some training. I thought you mentioned some training with your.
Yeah, so they'll come in and the team that's actually going to do the event with this facilitator, they'll come in and kind of teach you what a Kaizen
But
is.
totality is the three.
Totality is 3. He's going to come in, let me correct myself here. He will come in, meet the people, follow the process on his own the first day. And then a week later, he's coming back. That's the 3-day event. We actually have some other dates set up if needed, but I don't think. I think altogether we'll be charged for 4 days probably. So that's kind of what's going on. This is probably what our project list is really going to look like this year, other than the right-of-way pilot. So anyways, we're working on the list, but it's really going to be around these 3 bottom things. Any questions on any of the projects? And the open positions, just to let you know, we did open up the operation manager position internally per the contract. We have to do that 5 days ahead. So that was issued on Friday. And then we'll go public with it either tomorrow or Friday. And then internally, we've already posted the the manager position and then the marketing position and billing position. So everything is internally posted. We're kind of waiting those days out and Jeannie will start issuing those out on the HireCentric. Any other questions on projects? I was going to skip over the metrics unless there's any questions.
Yeah, does anybody have any questions on the metrics? We'll just generalize that. Okay, yeah, that's good.
Matt?
All right. Okay, the big things on the balance sheet till we ended the year, our net plant up from prior year, roughly about $2.5 million between depreciation and what we've done. So, but the points on here that I have, total current and accrued liabilities are up 261,000 for the month. That's number A. That's an increase in AP. That's normal every year end. We have a jump in AP because we accrue things and have the stuff that comes in after year end. Everybody's trying to get their bills done right at the year end. Not stuff doesn't drag out as much. B is other property plant. That's our patronage credit from Hoosier, or our allocation that we got there, which that was higher than expected by 25%. And then total current accrued assets, that's down. Our general fund decreased because we did patronage refunds in turn at the county level. RMC level, however you want to put it. Any questions on the balance sheet?
Yeah. Just curious, accumulated depreciation went down from November to December. $17.9 at the end of November and 17, not quite 9 at the end of December.
Oh, you're not looking at this sheet. He's looking at the, I'm sorry. I'm sitting there thinking, what?
Obviously.
No, I'm looking at the balance sheet. I'm sorry.
I can bring it up on the board too, Matt. He's talking about the actual financials.
Yeah, I'm talking about the actual one. I'm sorry. Retirements? I don't know.
There, we did write off a bunch of stuff.
Which would explain that. I was just curious because that's obviously.
We went through anything that was obsolete. We had Eric go out back.
Oh, that's what it was, right?
And if there was anything that we deemed to be, hey, it's been here for long enough, we haven't used it, we're gonna go ahead and write it off. And we try to do that once a year, go through, and if something's gone, it's not here, does it have value?
But this year there were quite a bit of things that we did go ahead and write, like we had an
Yeah.
old trailer here that we need for room. So a lot of that, there were some bigger ticket item things that we went ahead and got rid of off there. So
Well, that wasn't a big ticket, but yeah, there was. some
other
big
things like that, yeah.
I mean, pretty much anything that, hey, this has been sitting on this shelf for 15 years.
That trailer took up a fair amount of space, didn't it?
It did.
It did, yeah.
It is a antique. Hoosier's gonna put it in their museum. Yeah.
Any other questions on the balance sheet? All right, next we have the income statement. So our year-to-date actual operating revenue, just under 40 million, power costs of 29 million, so gross margin just under 11 million. Controllable expenses, just 5,800,000, fixed expenses, 2,600,000. So that left us with operating margin of 2.3 million. Our non-operating income was $1.2 million, which left us with total margins for the year of 3.5 million. So, and the points on these are our revenue and power costs were higher than budgeted because our budget did not include the tracker. And that's something that changed for next year going forward. So we'll see how that works. Controllable expenses are under in multiple spots and under in several. You can see from my note there, we're over in operations and billing and under in maintenance and admin. And our non-operating income, I've noted that Hoosier patronage allocation was 25% higher than budgeted. So we budgeted that around 3/4 and it came in right at about $1 million. Any questions on the income statement? All right, cash flow, really the only thing to note there is cash went down 1.3 million at patronage retirement in December. A lot of money went out the door. You want to go to the next slide?
Oh, yep, sorry.
Plant. You can see here where things worked out for the year. We're just a tick over our actual is just ticked over from budget. The biggest thing on plant that was over budget, was meters and transformers. That should not be the case going forward, as we've gotten all our safety stock in now. And we should be good to go. And as we need transformers and use them, we'll order to replace. So we're not, we have, which we've talked about that at length many times. And then the other thing is we had the higher service upgrades. We had a big project there at New Point. That was a large amount of money. Other than that, everything else is, I can speak to each one if you have any questions on them. If you'd like me to, I will.
When it comes to like the transformers, there was a subdivision that didn't develop over there off of Hunterville Road. And there's several transformers sitting there. Do you ever is it cost effective to go get them?
No, because those are,
Or utilize them?
all those lots are sold and it's stuck in legal right now. There will be houses where we would never want to go pull that out. It's all underground too.
That's fine. I just stand there and I know things kind of have been deadheaded there for a year or better. I didn't know if that's something that.
If something's out there and we know nothing's gonna go in there, like if a house was there and it burned down or something, and the transformer is fairly new, those are things we will go pick up. But I mean, if it's a 50-year-old transformer, a lot of times it's not worth the money to go grab it until you take the poles down and stuff.
That's fine. I just
Yeah.
happened to drive by the other day and.
If something were to happen there where, hey, this is never gonna happen, I mean, then that'd probably be different, I assume, right, Brent?
Yeah.
I mean, if we got, hey, somebody came in there and said, rip all this stuff out, yeah, we'll go get them.
So just so everybody knows, because I had a conversation with Warner actually, I can say that, but they had a deal with a house builder it's a non-custom home house builder to come in and build those houses. They had almost all of them sold at that point. And that builder wanted out of it. So they breached their contract. Now it's in court. And so the way I understand it is all the lots are sold as of today, but they can't do anything with them because it's stuck in legal. There was a lot of money that was pending on the builder to build these, all the margin that would have went to the developer. So it's going to go. It's just a matter of when.
I don't know if it was in realtor's hand. I just knew something.
In lawyers' hands.
Didn't know what was going on there. And then I was sitting there thinking.
It could still be a while.
I know. I was looking at the dollar that we had invested with that. It's
Yep.
not generating squat right now. So didn't know if there was an opportunity. Okay.
Any other questions on the plant?
Are we good?
2024, we can look forward to a condensed
Yes.
replacement listings.
Yes, unless you'd like it broken out.
No, I think your new plan is great.
Did I already do that? No. Hey, Sam. Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay, so we're gonna come out of open session and go into executive session at this time.
Sam, you want to click over to my personal?
Yeah, I will close out of this one.
We're going to be coming back into open session.
Not excessive.
So,
No more than communion.
That went out.
Next item on the agenda,
Have a sip.
everyone, next item on the agenda is policy 10-3, sick leave. Right, you wanna?
yeah, so I'll go over this. So, sick leave is one of those, so the idea of sick leave is twofold. One, it's obviously for if you're sick. Two, we don't carry short-term disability, right? So it's a tool that an employee can use if you have surgery or something like that. We also allow them to use, we don't have any bereavement, so we allow them to use sick days for that. So that was the idea originally years and years ago when they had sick time. So an incentive to not use sick time has always been in our policy that we will essentially pay out the equivalent dollar value to your health, your medical premiums until you either run out or you hit a certain age, right? So that's always been in policy. So what happens? So you're trying to incentivize people again not to take the sick time. So what happens when you have somebody that retires at age 65 and they've built up sick time, right? And they have all this sick time and they're 65 years old. If you look at the policy today, at age 65, they basically lose that sick time, the value of that sick time. So you've asked them to use it wisely. They did it and now they're 65. They're not retiring. I'm just making up numbers here. 66 is when they plan on retiring. That sick time is at no value to them. What are you going to do if you're an employee? You're going to stick around and work and you're going to be sick every Thursday and Friday
Time off.
until you start burning some of that sick time back.
Question on that whole thing, on the, which one was it on there? Oh, A, and the policy. It says that ours will be prorated based on, an employee may accumulate a total of 770 hours of sick leave. Okay, is that over a period, what period of time is that?
That could be 20 years. That is the max that you.
Time they've been here.
Okay, so
Over the time they've been here, yes.
we divide that by 24 hours, that's 32 days.
Yep.
So they can take 32 days off.
24 hours.
24 hours.
Be a lot more than that.
8 hours.
Well, we're happy 8 hours.
But 8 hours, okay, 8 hours.
Be time tripping. But you also have to have approval to use sick time so that they don't use it like, so you have to have approval. All of our policies and any type of benefit like this, it has to be approved by the manager. So if you are, yeah, I guess if you were sick for a month, you can. We've had people on that have had surgeries for sick time, right? Because we don't have short-term disability. So yes, that does happen. We've had people have surgeries. That's the whole kind of the point of it. I'd love to get out of sick time and all this and call it PTO, but that's going to have to be done at a very, very lengthy union negotiation. So anyways, my whole point on this change really goes back to if you're an employee that's 65 years old, you have all this unused sick time that is at no value to you anymore because that's what the policy says. You're going to probably be sick every Thursday, Friday for a while until you burn up some of that. Why wouldn't you, right? What I'm saying is we extend this to the tune of we'll pay a quarter of whatever it is, a quarter, 25% of whatever the value is. What I mean by value is if you're $10 an hour employee, right? For every hour, it's $10 essentially. So we would pay that out at 25% instead of full value. That's really what the change is allowing people to have some value and so that they can retire when they want to retire rather than trying to burn an incentive essentially.
I don't have a problem with K. I have a problem with lowering the ages on the other ones. I think K is, if you work till you're 65, I think there should be some type of benefit for that. But lowering the age is when the average age is going up. And right now, the average age last year was 64 to retire. So that maybe lowering it to 60 instead of 62. And
That's fair. I
don't have an issue with K. I just have an issue with lowering the ages.
Yeah, and I'm perfectly fine. The only reason we changed J was just to get it. That was very similar to what the industry's doing, but honestly, that's not the entire reason we're doing this change.
My concern is, will this open up union negotiations again, changing this?
No, because it is, Jeannie and I had that conversation. No, it would not. Can we go into executive session real quick? Do you mind?
Sure.
You guys, is that okay? Can we go into executive session?
We're going to leave open session and go into executive session. We're back into open session. Suzanne,
I make a motion to approve K. However, on J and L, keep the ages of the original amounts.
okay. Second. We have a first and a second with the modifications that Suzanne stated. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, the same. All right. The next item is the nominating committee members. Tell me out of that, Clay and Dale. No. Clay,
Dale and Jason.
Dale and Jason.
Okay.
Yeah, Abby just brought to me yesterday, because I know we've talked a lot about like posting for the director candidates being available, but then also doing for the nominating committee so that we don't have people feeling like we left somebody out. She had mentioned if we have someone who is having a really hard time finding someone without
Dale.
just putting it in the paper, she drafted a letter that would actually come from you as the director. And we would pull a report for every person that's in your district. And then this letter basically talks about what it means to be a nominating committee member, what their duties are, and then for them to reach out to you if they are interested. And we could do that for
Yeah,
anybody.
I shared with Jeannie, I'm 0 for 9 right now.
But this would, and I don't know exactly what you're thinking.
Well, I just looked it up.
That's a great idea.
Yours, it's $424 would be postage to send out to every person in your district. So, because postage is 66 cents right now for a letter.
What if you did,
I thought
what
just went up to.
if you did it all email? Can you
Do an email blast.
If they have email.
Can you do that by district though? Might not be a shot to do that
I was
first.
gonna say, you could probably do emails within that district.
It'd be too hard to do it as a.
Then just see if you don't, yeah,
Just spend $424.
free to email.
Doable.
Would it be cheaper that way?
Would they make it from Dale's email address?
Instead of a separate letter?
I don't know. I have to ask that.
From Dale's email address to everybody in his district? I mean, it would be a worth a shot for the price.
I bet you.
Information to do that. Do that first is your point.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say, yeah, let's do 424 because
Right.
the current member I have, Steve found last year, because see, well, I've got this special circumstance where I just did this last year.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Because I had one that moved out and I just went through this last year.
About got you out of it, but
Yeah.
Aaron caught it.
Yeah, but I've already been through that once myself.
It has nothing to do with their responsibility. Be able to find anybody that wants to fulfill that responsibility, which I'll go on record and saying, again, I'm not in favor of having a nominating committee, but that's me.
Let's get back with you.
Yeah, that'd be
If the answer is yes, then
Thank you, Abby. Thank you.
Yeah. Just an option, like, we know that it is hard.
I don't know how many within my district with emails, but anything you get.
Right.
There's about a couple more I'm gonna call,
Yeah.
but yeah, that would be wonderful. That's much appreciated help.
We'll find out and then we'll check Ryan on the bill stuffer. I mean, I know normally for a bill stuffer, it's like $550 a month, but that's to all
But I
members.
don't know if
So
they could
it would be significantly less. But they probably will charge us to pull the, to pull the report. And I guess you list charge for everything, so probably costs more than mailing them out. By the
Okay.
time that they do the special report.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
But the email blast first.
Thank you.
We have to talk about it now. It's- New people wouldn't even know.
Help for me.
Jason, do you have yours?
Do I have one?
Your person,
Oh, no.
No?
I hadn't volunteered. But we have to work some things out first, maybe.
Okay.
you are live. Yeah.
No, I don't have any names to turn in at this point.
Okay. How about you, Clay? No. All right, but we probably need those by next month.
What was it next month?
Well, because the bios and everything, we'll be going through that here in the not too distant future. Correct.
Yeah. Yep.
Clay, are you and Jason interested in this option if it's possible?
I don't know, maybe, sure. I don't want to say.
Email's free.
Yeah, I don't want to do it right now. What happens if you get 10 back?
You put 10 on the ballot. Costs us more money though. Else gotta be bigger, it's more money.
Paper's going up.
Yep.
I'm gonna work on it on my own.
All right.
The options there, yes. Keep going from there.
All right,
I appreciate it.
the next two items are policies that we discussed at last month's meeting. I'm not sure that, if anybody's looked at those a little bit closer, thought more about what our discussion around. Anybody have any comments? I know there was a question that came out last month. Which courses you still needed? Did you determine what those were?
With Jamie to find out what all I had. You want to be ready.
And so,
I need to get there.
and you haven't. If it would help, I think it's 2,600 and 2,610. That was based upon what was in the system and what you took in June of last year.
So there's two, not just one. There's two classes.
Right. So we don't have the policy extended here, but do we want to consider any changes to the policy? At this point?
I wonder if we haven't had it for a long time, but we had a committee that actually drafted this policy or at least amended it at one time. What was that called? The board?
Accountability Committee.
Yeah, that's where this policy originated. And I think that I was on that committee at the time.
I remember the policy was already there, wasn't it?
Well, we may be educational, or I know we amended this portion, certainly about the CCD. I don't know, maybe, I mean, I feel like at the time we didn't really handle very well maybe what was gonna happen if we didn't get the training done. And maybe that's what we need to just revise the policy. That would be my suggestion, but I don't know. That's not an individual decision. That may need to be some kind of committee thing again. I don't know. That's why I brought that up.
I mean, we've been talking now about it since last June. So I think it's time to continue the discussion. Yeah.
And I guess I'd like to ask a question kind of coupled with what we just talked about. I think for election this year is Brian, myself, and Clay. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but Clay, I'd asked you last month, are you planning on rerunning? Are you planning on running for reelection?
After, you're not putting me on the spot because it's going to get brought up. After talking with my family and my business partners, with what, according to this, they're going to require and have me doing, this is taking a lot of time, taking me away from my responsibilities that I had before I even got on the board. I'm not planning on running. Okay. So, I'm going to be fair to my family and my partner.
And I think you're being fair to us because with that said, we have something in the bylaw about changing this to a 7-member board. And if you're saying tonight that you're not running, then we need to enact upon that bylaw.
I think it's fair. I wanted to bring it up. I didn't know we were going to do it here in Oakland, but that's fine. This is taking a lot more time than I was anticipating. And when I've got to go to these meetings and I've got 2 businesses to run plus farm and I can't get away from it's not working. I got too many other responsibilities that I had prior to getting here. out of fairness to everybody, I think I'm not gonna run.
Okay. So we need to follow through with that bylaw change then with the 7 members, and I'm not so sure, or with 7 directors. So I don't know what all that will.
I found 3 companies that I can go out and get quotes from that will throw our districts and our mapping information into a software and essentially redraw it. I don't know how it all works. I just know it's automated and it doesn't. I was hoping it would be a deal where whoever does it, the consultant would come in here, work with you guys to throw the parameters in you want, and it would spit out, here's the new districts. I don't know how much that costs.
Yeah, but I think we have legal questions too then, because with the nominating committee and the person that was gonna fulfill that obligation to find somebody to run, we probably want to nix that.
Who is your nominating committee? So why wouldn't we just give Joyce a call?
Well, it's cool. She's gonna be done in June anyway. She's gonna expire when.
So that'd be, it all works out actually.
That time was,
Called me here and asked me, and I said, well, I'll
That's why
get
you're,
back with you.
so you haven't told her that yet? You haven't told her no?
I said, let me get back with you, because I need to do some talking with everybody.
so if she's up, that takes care of that problem.
And she is,
So it's just a matter of redistricting.
You don't need to find another one.
Clay's on here to find a nominating committee member.
So you don't have to do that. Okay. Which takes us back to, the policy itself. I know, Jason, what I heard you say is maybe we could form a subcommittee or some sort, or one more time, we can come back and say, maybe I can try my, hands at redlining something and just remove that verbiage out or something to that effect. Unless somebody else has any recommendations. Not at this time. Dale, do you?
No, I think that's fine. I think it's, I was just looking at the open items and it's been the standing open item we've had.
Yeah.
When the opportunity presents itself, which apparently it is.
Okay.
For us to act upon. So that, I think it's incumbent upon us to follow through.
That there is some verbiage that we have to change once we know what the districts look like. But this is gonna change all your marketing stuff. I'd stop marketing his district. But I think though, I'm confident there's a way that we can keep you all in the same districts somehow or another to make it less complicated, keep everybody in the same districts and basically give a little here, give a little there and get it down to 7. I'll engage these companies and see how much it costs and
Okay.
but the way I took it was they'll actually come in and work with the board to put these parameters in and it like draws it and then you kind of manipulate to make sure that you're all in your same districts. And then that'll be the new districts. The software, the other part about it is it'll write the legal descriptions. That'll go into the bylaws where it says like longitude, latitude, all that crap. So essentially all we have to do is, I don't even know that we need Aaron for that. I could probably do that. Then the new stuff and the old.
We might need Aaron.
There's a vote of confidence.
Tell me something.
Wait, what district are you currently in?
Hater for crazier.
It is 8? Okay, so that in of itself.
Kind of my thought on it.
Right, it too.
It does.
Why were
We don't have to renumber districts.
Exactly. So, well, except everybody that was an 8, that'll be in the,
Yeah.
well, and there'll be a number of other members in each probably.
I hate to say it, Clay, but I think out of everybody, yours is gonna be the easier one to go down to 7 possibly. You won't have to renumber. Knowing where that district's at, I think you can. Yeah, I don't know though.
Well, we'll see. We've got that taken care of. We'll table the policy changes for 1.7, potentially. 1.8, I think I'll just take off because we said we would look at that again probably before the next budget. if we want to add dollars to, once you get your CCD and or BLC. So that takes us to the affiliated organizations. Brian, you have something about hometown tonight, don't you?
Yeah, we'll meet in March.
So.
You had some.
Worth the wait.
How about you, Jason?
We had a board meeting January 16th. The only thing they didn't mention, we had, I think I told you that one director passed away from Orange County, Rodney Hager. But then the Henry County director, Wayne Jester, literally just had a heart attack and died. He was like 54, 3 kids, like very involved. I went to his visitation, probably the biggest visitation I've ever been to. It was huge. So it's kind of been a downer at Hoosier, but we didn't take any official action. The minutes from the meeting are not on call to order yet, so I assume they'll get uploaded at some point, but we didn't take any action on anything, so, and you got tonight about what's going on.
And as far as IEC goes, are you done?
Sure.
As far as IEC goes, no monthly with last February. I believe the facility is coming along very well. I'm not so sure when it's truly supposed to be completed, but I know it's the spring or late spring, I think. I can't remember when the move's supposed to be, but I'll know more next month on that. Anybody involved in any training or conferences? January 9? Anybody have anything else?
Jason's gonna have to pick up some and Steve's gonna have to pick up some. Look at that.
I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
We've got a first and a second. We're adjourned.
I'm gonna read this one out.
It's 10 o'clock.